Okay, good evening. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Cunningham Township Board. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu.
Here.
Mr. Evans.
Here.
Ms. Hersey.
Here.
Ms. Colasetti.
Here.
Ms. Bishop.
Here.
Ms. Wilkin.
Here.
Mr. Quisenberry.
Here.
Mayor Marlin.
Here.
Ms. Chenoweth.
Present.
Ms. Owana.
Next item is approval of minutes from previous meetings of February 13th, 2023 and March 13th, 2023. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Mary Alice, seconded by Sharice. Any substantial changes? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. That motion passes. Are there any additions to the agenda? Public participation. If anyone wishes to address the Cunningham Town Board, please step up to the microphone. Right, seeing none. Committee to verify bills, Town Fund and GA Fund.
Good evening. So, supervisor's memo. Okay, so this last month,
Is your mic on?
can you hear me? This last month we had in expenditures $44,595.95 in the town fund. In the general assistance fund, we had $77,573.16. Our total expenditures was $122,169.11. And I'll go over the rest in the supervisor's memo. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Questions? Is there a motion to approve the town fund and general assistance fund bills?
So moved. Second.
Who made the motion, please?
I did.
Mary Alice? Seconded by Sharice. All those in, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu.
Yes.
Mr. Evans.
Yes.
Ms. Hersey.
Yes.
Ms. Colasetti.
Yes.
Ms. Bishop.
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin.
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry.
Yes.
That motion passes. Next item, the reports of officers, third quarter financial report.
So I'll just highlight a few things from the supervisor's memo and then we can go over the financial report. So basically with general assistance, things have stayed steady. We have 61 current participants down from 62. 10 are homeless. We had 23 applications last month, up from 20, which is not much. We rental assistance, and we see this pretty much every spring around this time. We had 3 households supported with rental assistance for the month of March. That's a little bit lower than usual at this time. Part of that issue is that we're only providing 1 month of rent, so sometimes people will come and they need more than a month to be made whole. We're hoping with the implementation of the ARPA rental assistance, we'll be able to increase that allocation and serve more people. We had 38 applications last month, 2 months ago. Now we had 32 applications, so we still have quite a few applications coming in. We've spent 92.4% of our budget. Things have slowed down with homeless assistance vouchers. Essentially, our community was anticipating an additional round of emergency housing vouchers, and we recently were told, the Housing Authority was told that they were not awarded those vouchers. So that's going to slow things down for individuals moving into housing. Luckily, our township has been awarded sponsor-based vouchers. We're able to start referring families. I think you saw that at our special meeting. So for families, we'll be able to, for literally homeless families in our program, we will have a voucher option for them. We have also been told that the Housing Authority will open its wait list for housing choice vouchers. So anyone who wants to know about when that wait list is open, I would encourage you to get on the Housing Authority's listserv as well as Cunningham Township. So we will definitely, as soon as we know, send out to everyone on our list that opportunity. And I think I would say the other thing of note is that the homeless shelters remain full, both the women's shelter and men's shelter at the low barrier. And See You at Home has some hotel availability under kind of like when there's a severe weather situation. But otherwise, we basically as a community, because a portion of See You at Home is still occupying a portion of Stride's space, we're not really able to work, as a community, serve out to capacity at Stride. So hopefully as See You at Home finds a new home, we'll be able to increase that capacity. So the pieces are in place, but we're not there yet as a community. We continue to be full in our emergency housing program. And yeah, I think the only other thing is we are seeing a market increase in food assistance requests with the end of the COVID SNAP bump. So we're seeing that, and we're starting to see utility requests come in. The utilities are frozen. The power is not able to be shut off when it's under a certain temperature in the winter. And because it's beautiful in spring out, that means for some people that they have their power shut off. So we are receiving some phone calls. Most of them are from Champaign. We are only serving Urbana residents with that. So we are able to assist those Urbana residents and refer the Champaign residents to LIHEAP if they haven't used it already. Happy to answer any questions about the supervisor's memo before going on to the quarterly report. Okay, so in terms of quarterly report, you have this in your packet, but essentially, I would say we're on deck. Anytime that you see something over 75%, roughly over 75%, you'll see notes associated with it. We're doing very well in terms of our investment income, and actually I'm looking to do some additional strategic investment of funds next year so that we can boost that. As I had, the temporary had made it, the assessor had made some temporary hires, and so in personnel other, you'll see that hasn't gone up. The assessor spent that budget and it stays at 100%. So they didn't spend in quarter two. There's still the miscategorization issue. We do, under utilities, I just want to note that Lincoln Square was billing us for rent and not utilities under the lease. They caught that and sent us the bill for utilities, and we looked over those documents and paid that out. So you'll see the utilities is at 85% because we actually are paying part of last year's. I didn't catch that. Lincoln Square didn't catch it. Assessor didn't catch it. So we recently caught it. We made a one-time payment on our audit, so we're at 100% there. Essentially in our town fund, we are under budget. We're running at about 61%. And then in our general assistance, it's similar. So we're on track to spend down our IDHS grant. We got a larger than expected USD grant. We do have some fundraising we need to do for Solidarity Gardens, but that's a fund that we don't spend any more than we have, just like angel donors, so we're never gonna run a deficit there. And then you'll see we bought school supply programs with the additional dollars from USD that show up in supplies. We've done a lot of repairs at the building. I think we're in pretty good shape, and things are steady there. But we did replace the boilers. They were at their lifetime. And then we've seen a high demand in rental assistance. So essentially we're in GA, we're not quite at budget in terms of expenses. We're at about 67%, which I think is healthy because I tend to budget for about 15% over as a just in case. So things are looking comfortable there. Any questions about the third quarter report?
Grace.
Thanks for walking us through that. I think page 1 and 2 makes sense to me. I don't know if you could explain more about page 3 about the net income and some of those negatives. Like, did we value a negative?
Yeah, so net
budget,
income is always tricky because we get paid our property taxes at the very end of the year, but this is on a cash basis. So the net income is going to look low because we're anticipating those property tax payments, and they'll come in May and June. And then that'll offset and we'll see a balance. But in every case, you'll see us running net income. If we move to an accrual basis, which we've explored with the auditor, our auditor, well, so we have CLA as our accountant. They do not recommend that we move to an accrual basis for various reasons I could go into, but essentially we do modified cash basis, and it does create this situation. We could always produce financial reports on an accrual basis, even if we're not accounting in that way, because we could, we could put information. But generally speaking, if you look, our income is pretty much, basically with the exception of the angel donor and the Solidarity Gardens, where we don't spend any more than we have, our money is basically guaranteed. So it's not as important to look at the net income because we know that the dollars, the tax levy is guaranteed.
Thank you.
Any other questions? There's no unfinished business. Moving on to,
Oh,
sorry.
so I'm just gonna hop over to the other computer.
Fair Housing Workshop overview.
So as I mentioned at our last meeting, we had 3 fair housing workshops, and I will just pull this up. How does that look? We had 3 fair housing workshops with our coalition partners, Housing Authority, RPC, CU Tenant Union Fair, Hope Fair Housing, and Housing Action Illinois. I know Christopher and Mary Alice were present. I'm sorry, maybe someone had come to the service providers. But I know that the 2 of you were present at some of those workshops. I gave you the entire slide deck from the workshops for your reference. I found it, I've been working on housing discrimination, and issues of fair housing for a number of years, and I definitely learned things from this workshop, in addition to making some new partnerships. We had, we counted 105 people total who came to the 3 workshops, which was a really good turnout. Here's the tenants workshop here. We had 2 different participants who had experienced housing discrimination who gave testimony as part of the presentation. We really appreciate their testimony and their participation. What I did for this portion is I just pulled out, you have the whole slide deck, but I really wanted to just pull out a few slides that I thought would be relevant in our learning process. And I'll go over these slides, and then, I would really encourage you, if you have questions about housing discrimination, we're working very close with Hope Fair Housing and Housing Action. I would start with Hope, and their contact information is in the slide deck, and you should feel comfortable reaching out to them at any time. They were very accessible. So basically, I'll just do a handful of slides that I think were highlights. One is, there's different kinds of discrimination. One is direct. It's you're treating someone less favorable, and then there's disparate impact, where a policy looks neutral on its face, but when put into practice, it has a greater negative impact on one class over the others. And it's important to look at both of those kinds of discrimination, and both are actionable. And I learned a lot more about the actionable piece. So the left hand is their slide, and then I added the City of Urbana protected classes, so you can kind of see all 3. Some of the things I think it's important is to note that, yes, source of income effective the first of the year. Source of income in Urbana is protected class going back, so if somebody has a case within the last year, they're still able to bring that forward. It also is the case that in Illinois, protected class is arrest record, and there's some interesting history that they shared around that piece. But as you can see, really, the City of Urbana provides the best protection over and above Illinois or the feds. And so it's important that we have enforcement across all 3 domains because of that, because they don't entirely line up. Here's some examples of prohibited acts. I think there's some confusion sometimes around, like, well, can you just tell somebody I'm not, I don't run to Section 8 and it's verbal, or, what if you just don't show somebody the unit, or you don't respond to their call? Right, so refusing to rent someone or lying about the availability of housing is a very, very common occurrence. And so oftentimes the situation, and this is the piece that I think as a city we need to untangle, is that the situation is that people are so used to discrimination as the baseline experience of their existence, trying to access housing if they have a voucher, or if they are a person of color, or if they are from a low-income family, or if they have many children, or they're not a student. Those tend to be the big ones in our community. They're so used to it that they actually oftentimes will say, hey, do you take vouchers? And you might say, well, why are you saying that? Because that like triggers the landlord to then say, you know, no, I don't take vouchers, or, oh, I don't discriminate, but we don't have any housing available. And then the next person who walks in who doesn't have a voucher, there is housing available. The issue is that for tenants, they pay somewhere between $20 and $40 per application fee. So they're actually being really smart in asking people whether or not they're a discriminator up front, because otherwise they're gonna have to pay $400 in application fees for 10 units. I mean, so it can really become expensive for them. And so that's why I think it's important for us to look at other tools in addition to tenants taking up this issue and bringing complaints forward, is because for that tenant, it really is, it's very onerous to ask them to continue to pay application fees and then to be denied housing if it's hard to prove. That said, I support people in doing that, and we will help them. I just think we need additional tools. Steering units, like showing people units, you know, the example was given that steering a family with children to a first floor unit rather than a second floor unit so that the kids' feet doesn't make noise on the first floor, that's discriminatory. It actually could be, you know, it might be safer or better for that. The family with children should have the exact same options in front of them as the family without children. Denying access to certain amenities others have access to, charging additional or higher fees. We see this happen. This includes things like you have to pay 2 months of deposit or 3 months of deposit, and we see that a lot in the community. Oh, we're gonna do a risk assessment because you're paying with a voucher, now you have to pay 3 months deposit. So we've seen this, or having different application criteria or discriminatory ads or statements, including this is student housing, unless it's actually, or senior housing, there's only certain conditions under which you can state that. A fair housing violation is a prohibited act, plus a protected class equals discrimination. So I found that to be a really helpful definition, and the protected classes, as you saw in Urbana, are quite, you know, there's quite exhaustive. And I did send you a note that Champaign has changed their human rights ordinance to prohibit source of income discrimination explicitly. So we're really happy to see that they did that in December, underlying the enforcement of that issue. So what is source of income discrimination? I think this is important because it may look different in different situations, but when a landlord, mortgage lender, or other actors treat households unfairly because of their subsidy, non-wage income, or forms of home financing. And I think this is important that we understand that oftentimes it's a proxy for other forms of discrimination, and I'll show you a slide that gets to that. So this is what the state law says. It should say state law, because the feds say one thing, state says the other, ours says something, but this is the lawful manner by which an individual supports himself or herself or his or her dependents. And so you can see it's veterans, it's people using housing choice vouchers, it's people who have survivor benefits or SSI, people on TANF, people who receive general assistance. These are all folks impacted. And what this means is someone's homeless and they can't get into housing. They have a voucher, but they don't have a choice in where to live, or they have a voucher and they lose it because they can't find a location. And so it can, or creates kind of a culture of disrespect. How this impacts people, this is discrimination based on race, gender, children, or disability, oftentimes by another name. So the landlords had a get out of jail free card in the state, because they could say, it's not you, it's your voucher, I just don't take vouchers. But now, or it's not you, I just don't take Social Security, disability, or I'm not going to count your child support. So I took this map of Urbana from the U of I, and it is based on 2010 census data, but I don't think there's been a huge change since then, since the U of I updated this. Essentially, when you have source of income discrimination, you create segregation. And then segregation affects access to employment, education, food, and wealth. and your ability to have the value of your home go up once you're able to purchase. So essentially what you can see is there are community issues that happen from allowing source of income discrimination to exist. It's also important to note that most of the people using a voucher in the community are Black, female, head of household. And so when you allow source of income discrimination, you are allowing racialized and gendered discrimination. Here's examples of discrimination straight from Hope Fair Housing, the enforcers. I don't take Section 8. You have to have a job to rent here. We don't accept township rental assistance. We refuse all emergency. We don't work with the housing authority. They refuse to fill out paperwork. We don't want our space inspected. These kind of issues. Also, any difference in how people are treated. Oh, I'm going to do a background check on you because you have a voucher, but no, I know your brother, so come on in, right? Or I charge voucher holders extra for the application, which we suspect is happening, but we're mostly working with voucher holders. Insisting the tenant buy extra insurance if you rent through a DV agency, requiring a Social Security participant to prove they'll receive income for the duration of the lease. And then this issue, I think, happens quite a bit. We had one of the participants spoke about this. She was denied based on her credit score, which was a pretty great credit score and was higher than the stated credit score that was needed by this landlord. So she's pretty sure, and we are sense that it's a source of income discrimination situation because she was told that she was denied based on her credit score. So is renting to housing choice vouchers now mandatory? This is, I think, the difference between mandatory and voluntary. It is not voluntary, right? You can't just voluntarily take the voucher, but it's not mandatory in that it is not the only criteria that you're allowed to look at. So a housing choice voucher holder, you can't look at the fact that at their source of income. You can look at their credit. You can look at their landlord references and other pieces as a landlord. There's been some disinformation amongst the landlord community, particularly that this is forcing them to take vouchers over and above other criteria. As long as they treat everyone equally and they apply the same standards in every situation. Now, there is one example that I think is important, which is that it's Hope Fair Housing's opinion, and it's opinion of the state champions of this, is that if you require someone to have 3 times the income of rent, that for a voucher holder, you have to look at 3 times their portion of the rent, not the entire rent. That would be treating them fairly. So if you're a general assistance participant and your rent is $90 a month, which is about what it would be, then you would need to show that you get 180, which general assistance is more than that, and you would qualify. So you can't be denied based on your income for general assistance if you're a voucher holder. That wouldn't be proper because all general assistance participants make low enough that they would qualify for the lowest end. And that's what this slide is about, which is very complicated, and you can look at it in your slide deck. But this is a memorandum from the Director of Human Services, Human Rights and Ethics at the state level that basically says what I just said, which is it is her opinion, and it's the state opinion that you have to look at what the portion that the tenant is paying. Just to wrap up here, what this changes for renters: you can no longer treat types of income preferentially. You can no longer refuse to rent someone because of their occupation. You can no longer refuse to accept rental assistance. You can no longer refuse to rent to someone because they have a housing choice voucher, including refusing to complete paperwork or allow inspections. And at the state level, you can seek justice in court for the first time in Illinois, and landlord can face quite stiff penalties. That said, I will say that Hope Fair Housing shared, and I think this is really helpful to know, is that after the source of income, kind of the change in the bill went into effect the first of the year, they got a slew of discrimination complaints to Hope, which is great because it means the word got out. And they have not yet had to make a filing at the state level. So what they've done is that they act as an intermediary, which our office does as well. The city of Urbana has done this as well, which is to first communicate to the landlord that they are not in compliance with the law. And so far, with Hope Fair Housing, they've then complied with the law once it's presented to them. So that's why laws are really important, because you're able to look at it and say, yes, this is what the law says. You want to do business in this town. This is what it looks like. This is what's needed. So I think that we have an additional tool. We have an additional tool in Champaign, which is great. We have an additional tool at the state, which is great. We have layers of enforcement. I would encourage people to make use of all those layers of enforcement, and the entire slide deck is in your packet for your reference. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Before we go to questions, I would just like to add a couple of points from the city's end. Since the presentation that was made by city staff on the 20th, they've continued to seek information. City staff attended 2 of the 3 workshops put on by the Fair Housing Coalition. They've reached out to neighboring communities, including the city of Champaign. They also sought legal guidance from the legal team at the Illinois Municipal League, which was actually very, very helpful. And I appreciate all the input and information that has been received during the council meetings and during public input. And it's clear, and I found this presentation especially helpful, and it's clear that the overall message and impact of this state law is that, and that's the message that it's going to be to our community and to our landlords and tenants, is that a landlord simply cannot refuse to lease an available housing unit solely on the basis of a person using a voucher. And that landlords still have the right to apply rental criteria, such as looking at credit checks or seeking references, but they have to treat every applicant and the same at every step during the application and evaluation procedure. And that's the key behind the new state law. That's always been the key behind our local ordinance, which continues to be enforced in the city of Urbana and of course will be going forward. So I appreciate all the extra information that's been provided, and we are thankful for the additional information. So thanks. Any questions? Chandra?
So I've been thinking about this since you presented at the last town board meeting. You know how law enforcement have like sort of little sting operations with tobacco and alcohol, where they send in people underage people to try to buy tobacco or alcohol. When people come in to complain about a housing discrimination and maybe they don't have the exact right proof, is there an opportunity where you send in someone under the same, I guess, I don't know, kind of whatever, application, voucher, whatever, into that landlord, ask about a unit and see if the discrimination is real, like someone who is able to clearly identify and is trained to identify discrimination. And so you're sort of getting that proof for that
Absolutely.
person. Is that a program or some sort of thing that could be set up between township and the city, and like we work together to try to, because we don't exactly know which landlords there are, or whatever the case, we need harder evidence, whether it's to find them or to train or to educate them.
Yeah, thank you for that question. One of the things that I'm requesting of the Housing Authority is a list of all the landlords that they do business with. And I have from the city the rental registration list. We actually cross-reference and make sure people are registered with rental registration to receive rental assistance. And I think that list, looking at who isn't accepting vouchers, it doesn't say that they're committing discrimination, but that's like a good first pass, right? And then I think that we did at the workshop request tenants to list landlords they thought that we should look into. And they didn't have to provide proof. They just said, here's, these are landlords we think you should look into, word of mouth or through our families or friends. We may have concerns about them. Hope Fair Housing is planning on doing testing in this community. They're hiring testers right now. We're sending participants who can help with that, with the testing. And that is, I think, honestly, I mean, we know this from the civil rights movement, and we know it in this moment, and this is the new civil rights movement, that we need to do testing to uncover discrimination. So certainly Township we've made that recommendation. We'd be happy to work with the city on that. We will be working with Fair Housing, with Hope Fair Housing. And frankly, I think it's one of those things, it's like when we were on council and everyone screamed bloody murder that we weren't gonna allow smoking in indoor places. And we just heard so much grief about it. And we passed an ordinance here, and then the state passed an ordinance, right? So it was similar, Urbana being kind of visionary, and we passed it. And actually, we, you know, I'm sure there were some businesses who had heavy smokers, I've been told. There's at least one that may have been impacted, but I think we saw an increase of people who came to the table. We saw that a lot of the stories of what was gonna happen once people followed the law, it created a different atmosphere. And so I think what we don't understand is how much social impact discrimination creates. And so it's not hard to treat everyone the same. It really isn't. It's not, you know, it isn't your family. It's your business. And if your business is publicly facing, then you have to see black folks the same way you see white folks. You have to send them through the same application process as white folks. You know, you can't treat them differently. And I think we've just allowed this to go on for way too long.
So whenever the Fair Housing puts their testers out and you comb through that list of landlords, I'd be curious to see like some sort of report or something of the results of all of that.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I would encourage, you know, any council member wants to get more involved if you want to, you know, be on our Fair Housing Coalition list. So we started a list and we're starting to do more coordination. We're also going to do a bus ad campaign. The Housing Authority has agreed to be part of that. We would welcome the city of Urbana's participation in that. I think it's really important for tenants to know their rights and for landlords to know their responsibilities and vice versa.
Yes, thank you.
One thing that was pointed out by Fair Housing, that it is important to document as much as you possibly can, whether it's texts or voicemail or email or preferably written, but having that documentation makes it much stronger case when filing a complaint. Sharice.
Hi, okay, thanks Danielle for that. That's really good information. And I wanted to bring something to your attention in the sense that I have a constituent that it's not income discrimination, but he lives in 1 South and he says that he's renewing his lease, but they want him to sign an addendum to not, that he waives his rights to a class action. Is that also a discriminatory act?
I would very strongly encourage him to contact the tenant union. In fact, I always encourage anyone before they're signing a lease to contact the tenant union, but especially if they say any provision that doesn't seem to make sense. So I wouldn't, you know, it shows up in a lot of different ways. And also it may not be discrimination, it might just be illegal, or it might be, you know, so I think it would be useful for them to get a second look.
I was just wondering, you know, for someone to be forced to sign an addendum waiving their right to civil class action, that sounds to me like that would be somewhat discriminatory.
Well, my question is,
you're waiving your rights.
if everyone is asked to do that, then it doesn't seem like discrimination, but it may be something that if they're waiving their right to something that they shouldn't. So I think you'd have to look and see if the other folks who are renewing are also being asked to, especially those who might be students or might look or be different age or, you know, than the person you're talking to. See if they're also being asked to sign that addendum.
Okay, so he needs to contact the tenants union?
That's my
You got numbers for
recommendation.
tenants union? He doesn't say, he just says that he lives in my ward and he's been asked to, like, part of his re-signing the lease is that he signs that addendum and he agrees to it.
It's CU tenant.
CU tenant union email.com, and he should email
So that's cu10@union@gmail.com and
Okay.
attach documentation, just so that the video also has it.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Esther.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So next up are going to be two presentations. I just wanted to ask that they be swapped since Anna's kind of flows into Brittany's presentation. So I do want to, we are a field site. I am a field instructor at the School of Social Work, as is Jasmine Hernandez and Lilia Garcia. Lilia is in our, raise your hand, Lilia. She's also a field instructor and licensed social worker in our office. And we have 3 interns actually this semester. 2 of them will be presenting. They are just about to get their master's degree in social work. And one of the things that is a requirement is that they do a research project. And we are in the process of analyzing all of our programs. So each program, we're doing a deep dive, like a 3-month dive into that program that includes participant feedback. We look at, and so we'll do kind of overarching data collection. We do deep dive with interviews with participants, former participants, and current participants in that program. And then we come with recommendations for improvement. And so our plan is continuous evolution, continuous improvement of our programs, and we really thank Brittany and Anna for helping us with that. So these are their kind of final reports, and this also gives you a sense of where those programs stand, both through the eyes of our participants and through some of the data that we have in the office. And so I'll invite Anna up first. She'll be presenting on an evaluation of Cunningham Township's housing programs.
Hi, everyone. Danielle already kind of took care of the introduction for me, but I'm Anna Howe. I'm a social work candidate interning at Cunningham Township. I've been there since August, mostly working in our housing advocacy department. And as she said, I'll be presenting on our emergency family housing evaluation. This is just an overview of the housing programs that Cunningham Township offers. In the interest of time, it'll be in your slide deck, and I think a lot of you are familiar with them anyway, but for the record, they're right there. The evaluation of our family housing program kind of came in 2 parts. The first was more broad, where we reached out to all former housing program participants who had been moved from homeless status to permanent housing with the assistance of Cunningham Township. If you look at the supervisor's memo, that's 129 households served. That's as of this month, so 98 households were targeted when I started this evaluation in September, and 50 responded. And we inquired about things such as housing status, current rent status, like if they're current on their rent or behind, if they're behind on utilities, if they're food secure, any income concerns that they might have, and any other needs that they're experiencing. The purpose of the assessment was to identify past participants' current housing status, trends and ongoing needs, provide resources to people when possible, and inform new programs and policies. Some barriers we faced, I mentioned that we had about a 50% response rate.
Could you bring the mic closer to you?
Is that closer?
Just bring it closer so we can hear you and everyone else can hear you.
Yeah.
I can hear you, but I don't know if the people behind you can.
Is that better?
No.
Is this, okay.
There we go.
Sorry, I'm kind of a soft talker, so my apologies. So we had some issues reaching our former participants, and that's not uncommon with our population. They experience frequent phone shutoffs, changes in phone number, low email use, transients, and it's really difficult to get a good point-in-time snapshot of where former participants are at. Things frequently change in their world, and these calls were made across 4 months. So the biggest finding that we wanted to focus on was their current housing status. And the good news is that 88% of the former participants that we were able to speak with are currently housed. 68% are housed with a voucher or a subsidy. 18% were housed at market rate in a market rate unit. And then there was one individual, or 2% of the survey, that was housed, but their voucher status was unknown. 8% were precariously housed, which in this evaluation meant they had received an eviction notice, and 2 individuals had returned to homeless status. So while a lot of our participants had no existing needs and were doing well in their housing situations, 38% had no ongoing needs. There were about 42% of former participants experiencing food insecurity, 38% experiencing being behind on their utilities, and then rental assistance and employment training were other significant needs. The racial makeup, we're going to go over some demographics of the people I spoke with, was just over 50% Black. So you'll note that Champaign County is only about 14.5% Black as of the most recent census data. This disparity is consistent with the state of Illinois' plan to prevent and end homelessness, which was published maybe a year ago now, and it shows drastic racial disparities in homelessness in certain parts of the state, including our county. This shows some sort of systemic barrier or barriers for our Black population that a lot of our other racial populations are not experiencing. And then for this part of the evaluation, you'll notice that almost half of the households were only one person, which will be contrasted with the family shelter evaluation data that's more specific to families and obviously has a larger average household size. Major takeaways from this part of the assessment: the vast majority of households are still housed, but a major protective factor is housing subsidies that are not as available in our community at the moment as we would like them to be. Despite most households still being housed, many still experience some sort of support needs, like assistance with utilities or food, and having trouble communicating with former participants. We would like to maintain a more open communication line in the future. So the second part of the assessment was specific to the emergency shelter that we operate. I'll run through a little bit more information for those who don't know about that program. The emergency shelter operated by Cunningham Township is for Urbana families experiencing literal or HUD homelessness. We get our referrals from the school district or crisis nursery. Although we've had an emergency housing program for families for a few years now, the new properties purchased by Township in August 2021 is what this evaluation specifically looked at, and since that time, the waitlist has varied from between 0 families to 7, up to 8 is our maximum capacity in individual units, for 1-bedroom units and for 2-bedroom units. We employ a housing first model, which is a philosophy guided by the belief that people need basic necessities like food and a place to live before attending to anything less critical, such as getting a job, budgeting, or attending to substance abuse issues. And the program includes intensive case management with weekly goals to support or find housing. And the ultimate goal of the program is to achieve long-term sustainable housing for families. The purpose of this assessment was to identify strengths, weaknesses, and post-exit trends for this program specifically. We also wanted to compare how they might differ from other township housing programs, and we wanted to include families that did not necessarily exit into permanent housing. We wanted to research some best practices and then also inform program policies and new programs. The evaluation included 26 families. The average size was 3.54 individuals. The average length of stay was just over 86 days. And it only included families that spent the majority of their time in emergency housing in the California unit, so not in our hotel program. And we looked at length of stay, household size, exit location, current housing status, and any ongoing needs. Same barriers pretty much as with the first part of the evaluation. So the exit trend, so this is when families leave our program, 50% exited into subsidized housing, 7.5% exited into a market rate unit, so a much smaller amount, 11.5% left for transitional housing, 1% or 4% went to stay with friends or family, 3 families went to stay at a domestic violence shelter, 1 individual returned to homelessness, and there are 3 households where we don't know where they exited to. Some more demographics about this group specifically. Again, disproportionately blacks, 73.1%, about 20% white, not identifying as Hispanic or Latinx, and about 7.7% white, also identifying as Hispanic Latinx. You'll also see that the heads of households are overwhelmingly women. 25 out of the 26 households were headed by a woman. Also, not necessarily surprising, but single-parent households made up the overwhelming majority of the families that stayed in our shelter. 23 out of 26 households were headed by only one person. And the other significant demographic piece was that 10 out of 26 households were headed by someone with a disability, and that's almost 40% of all households being led by someone with a disability. Where they are now, current housing status, 46.2% are still securely housed. All of those who are securely housed exited our program with either a voucher or a path to a voucher through the Regional Planning Commission family shelter. 7.7% are in transitional housing today. 15.4% are precariously housed. So in this sense, precariously housed is either doubled up or they've received an eviction notice. For those who are precariously housed, they exited in mixed circumstances, but DV played a role in 2 of those exits, and only 1 family is currently unsheltered, and that person exited through a program termination. The immediate needs are pretty similar to the first group, so families are experiencing a lot of the same hardships as individuals who went through our programs, with the addition of baby supplies, which includes things like diapers, wipes, and formula. And there are a lot fewer families that reported not having any needs. So some internal strategies to address what we found in the evaluation. We developed and have partially implemented an individualized service plan so we can get better participant input and set clearer deadlines with our case management. We're working with waitlisted households before they enter the program to help create those service plans and access non-housing services like vital documents, SNAP, Medicaid. We're also in the process of developing a post-exit case management plan so people can remain supported when they exit into their own permanent housing if they choose. Increasing rental assistance in order to help people who are currently in their homes but are at risk for becoming homeless. Danielle mentioned the sponsor-based vouchers for families that we will be able to give out. And then some of the other needs, the digital inclusion program that we have can help people with their tech literacy. We're implementing regular feedback surveys so we can stay in touch with our former participants. We have a food assistance program, a utility assistance program for eligible Urbana residents, and then, of course, the Angel Donor Fund, which meets needs not covered by other programs through private donations. And then we also have an employment program that Brittany will talk about, so it's not included here. And then external barriers, I think things that a lot of us are facing, like inflation, the increase in energy prices, decrease in SNAP allotments, but for our participants in particular, the lack of vouchers and subsidized housing that's now not as much of an option in our community. I'd really like to stress that most of our participants exited to subsidized housing, including all of those who are still housed from the family program. And then just a general lack of affordable housing in our county available to people. That's it.
Thank you, Anna. Each of the presentations is timed to be about 10 minutes. So I know we're running a little bit short on time, and we have this and then one more item. I just wanted to give you a heads up. Also, you're welcome to send any questions about the presentations to me, and I'll make sure that they get answered. So since this isn't a time-sensitive issue.
Okay, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, make sure you speak into the mic.
Okay. My name is Brittany Tooten. I'm an MSW candidate at the University of Illinois, and I have been a social work intern with the Cunningham Township since August of last year. And I'm giving a presentation on the evaluation of our Employment and Education Opportunities Program. So the purpose of this was just to identify reasons that may inhibit our participants from pursuing education, even if they had indicated interest with their initial application. We've seen that on our general assistance application, nearly 45% of all applicants indicate that they are interested in pursuing their education. We also wanted to do an evaluation of the program's ability to prepare our participants for the workforce, do an evaluation of our host site, and also identify areas of interest for host site expansion in the future, as well as assess the satisfaction level with Township and the support our participants have received from our office. So in our presentation, I'm just going to go over a general background of the EEO program, go over the evaluation tools that I use to conduct this evaluation, as well as the evaluation results. So a general history, prior to the launch of our EEO program, Township offered a community work program, also known as the CWP. This program connected our community members with organizations to complete work hours. We partnered with organizations such as the Illinois Food Bank, the Habitat for Humanity, and Salt and Light. These traditional program rules were halted during the start of the pandemic due to closures of businesses due to health risks to our participants as well as the community. So EEO now, GA participants who are not applying for SSI or TANF are placed onto this track to generate job skills and or further their education in order to apply for more permanent work. This track requires participants to complete 24 volunteer hours at Salt and Light each month in order to keep their case open. Following that first month of completed volunteer hours, participants are able to pursue education in lieu of their volunteer hours. So currently we have 17 EEO participants as of last month, and we have 2 participants pursuing their education. So to conduct this evaluation, I use 2 evaluation tools. We use the participant feedback survey and the self-assessment. The participant feedback survey, we surveyed both current and former participants, and we collected information such as their most recent contact information, employment status, their current needs, an assessment of our host site, suggestions for improvement, and also an evaluation of our education program if it was applicable to them. The self-assessment looked at only our current participants that had at least 1 month of experience with our organization, and we collected pretty much the same information along with a more in-depth assessment of our host site, their comfort level and growth with the EEO program, an assessment of Township performance, and also suggestions for individual growth and improvement within Township. So like the other evaluation project, we did have some barriers to data collection. To conduct the data collection, I was given a list of 56 current and former EEO participants, and out of this list, I was able to contact 39, and I was able to complete the survey with 15 current and former participants with the participant feedback survey, and I was able to conduct the self-assessment with 6 of our current participants. So when someone is approved for GA, they go through a case open. In the year 2022, we had 49 case opens with the EEO program, and in 2022, we also had 39 case closures. In this chart, we have the major reasons for case closure. The number one reason for case closure is failing to submit a work schedule. When someone has a case open, the first requirement of them is to submit a work schedule with Salt and Light in order to keep their case open for that next month. The next reason for case closure was missing documentation following a warning. They do get one warning to get that documentation turned in. If they miss that deadline the second time, their case is then closed. And then the third biggest reason for case closure in 2022 was failing to complete their work hours. Once their case has been closed, a participant has up to 15 days to reopen their case in a grace period. So they can make up those lost work hours, submit their schedule, or submit that documentation they're missing, and their case will be reopened. If they miss that 15-day window, they have to start the application process again. So when I was doing the participant feedback survey, I asked our participants what they thought about their time working and volunteering with Salt and Light. And the majority of our participants enjoy working at Salt and Light, but find the work inapplicable to the jobs that they want in the workforce. So at the bottom here, I have two charts, and I asked, did you enjoy volunteering at Salt and Light? And over 50% of our participants agreed that they did enjoy working there. However, when we asked, did you learn any valuable skills you might be able to use in the future? Only 18.2% said that they did learn those skills there. So then I asked them, if the Cunningham Township were to expand the options for volunteering, which of these following areas would you be interested in, if any? And even though the sample size is really small right now, we do have a kind of a general understanding of what our participants are looking for. And we hope to see, get those wheels turning in the coming months. So it looks like we had 5 participants say that they'd be interested in volunteering in maintenance or custodial positions. And then we had 3 say they'd be interested in culinary, cleaning, and hospitality as well. Some other data I thought was very interesting was that 30% of our survey participants stated that digital literacy was a barrier to them for entering the workforce. Another 30% said that transportation was a barrier for them to enter the workforce, and 50% said that health issues, including temporary and permanent, were an obstacle for them entering the workforce, and 30% of those listed that as the primary reason their last job had ended as well. So focusing more on the education track, as I mentioned earlier, a participant has to complete 1 month of volunteer hours with Salt and Light prior to having that work requirement removed for them. This allows for time to work on applications and allow time for discovery of interest. And in the education program, they must be enrolled in at least 1 class per semester. A syllabus must be submitted at the start of the class. Their mid-semester grades must be reported back, as well as their final grades. And the participant must maintain a passing grade of 60% in each course that they may be taking at that time. So during the participant feedback survey, if they had indicated that education was something they were interested in their initial application, I asked them what barriers may face them into pursuing their education. And the 2 top reasons that we've seen so far have been health issues and also anxiety about performing well in school. And then we also saw some really bright spots in the data that we collected as well. So 55% of our surveyed former participants are currently employed. And then of those that were interviewed for this purpose, over 50% of those former participants have maintained 1 job for a year. 27.3% have held 2 positions in the last year, and then just under 20% have held 3 or more positions in the last year. And then this is from our self-assessment, just looking at an assessment of township from our current participants. And for this self-assessment, all of the questions were asked on a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being a negative response, 5 being a very positive response. So I asked, how would you rate your experience with township on a scale from 1 to 5? We had 2 very positive responses, 2 slightly positive responses, 1 neutral response, and 1 slightly negative response. And then when we asked I got what I needed from Township, we had 4 very positive responses, 1 slightly negative response, and 1 negative response. And what we can draw from this so far, we do want to continue to collect more data to see a genuine trend here, but sometimes Township is unable to address a specific need that is needed immediately. So we're hoping to be able to address it in the future as we move forward with their cases. So in summary, our participants have enjoyed volunteering with Salt and Light, but are interested in working in other areas in order to broaden their horizons. And then 45% of our applicants have identified interest in pursuing their educations. We want to work further into identifying how we can better support them in completing that goal. And we also want to address the turnover rate for the EO track and maybe consider some incentives for the future. And then it seems so far that we can tell from our current participants and from our past participants as well that our community enjoys working with Township and they do feel supported by Township. So our next steps looking to the future are we want to expand our host sites, explore and identify the root cause of health issues and anxiety surrounding performance in work and in school, identify ways to build confidence in our participants, and then continue receiving feedback from our participants via the self-assessment in order to increase the sample size and find genuine trends in our data. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brittany.
Can we ask?
I think in the interest of time, if you can email questions.
Okay.
Thank you. Very useful information, though. Last item on the agenda is Resolution T 2023-04-004R, which is the resolution authorizing the supervisor to sign an intergovernmental agreement with the City of Urbana for Bridge to Home, filling the gaps in local homeless and housing services. And this is the ARPA agreement.
So I think this is part 1 of a 2-part. So it's before town board. If approved tonight, it would go to city council. So you get to take 2 swipes at it. We could also do a joint meeting if that makes sense. But I went ahead and put it on the agenda. I have been back and forth with RPC staff to get some clarification, and we're ready to move forward on our end. There's a resolution before you that basically authorizes me to sign the intergovernmental agreement, which is attached. I think the question was, given that the scope, I think it was 55% of the request was funded, is proposed to be funded. Therefore, the request was what scope? How do we shrink the scope? So we're proposing to shrink to basically look at, and it's also been helpful to, we had 4 grants in the works at the same time, so just trying to line up all those pieces has been challenging. So we have more clarity at this point. We'd like to focus on emergency housing and homeless prevention through rental assistance. So essentially, and our project completion date would be the end of the ARPA date 12/31/2026, the last date that we could submit. So looking at the $658,838, 55% of that, what we have done is we're requesting $210,131 in personnel. This will be for rental assistance application processing, and I want to emphasize that it's temporary staffing because we are increasing the amount of rental assistance we're going to move. So we can't do that without staff. Like, most of what we do is vetting applications. The money part is the easy part. The hard part is the staffing part. So we're gonna, I'm proposing that we shrink the direct financial assistance to $300,000 for 2 reasons. One, we didn't get as much as we asked for. Second, I'm glad to see you funding immigrant as council, funding the immigrant partners. And as a result of that level of funding for our immigrant partners, we feel really comfortable with $300,000 because you're moving monies to those other organizations for rental assistance. So I've tweaked the personnel amount that we will need for that, and the emergency housing case management, and I know this was in our original application, but I think our application was 55 or 60 pages, so you may have not seen it. We're specifically requesting that the ARPA dollars help us meet our ESG match. So the State of Illinois Emergency Solutions Grant, it's a great grant, except that dollar for dollar, every dollar that the state gives us, we have to spend $1 of either some other grant money or our own money on literally homeless families, not on general rental assistance or, homeless prevention. It has to actually be that the same criteria for homelessness is applied in both instances. It is challenging for us, as it is for our partners, to do that 100% match. That's one of the reasons why we actually have a hard time finding organizations in the community to pursue ESG funding. And in past years, we haven't even gotten our full allocation at the county level for the county as a whole because we didn't have enough organizations. So Cunningham Township has stepped up to be an ESG fundee. We've done a lot with what we've had. We will continue to find various grants to make that match happen. So this is not a one and done situation. But we requested specifically personnel costs, so that meets our match with our emergency housing program. So that would pay for emergency housing either at the properties or in the hotels for Urbana families. The facilities piece, I think we're asking for $148,707. You can read here, but basically it's really focused on energy efficiency and security. Those are all of our requests are related to that. It would also pay for some of the utility costs, only a portion. They're quite high, and accessibility renovations to serve homeless residents. So we've not yet moved forward with that piece, but as soon as we get the grant approved, then we'll be putting that out to bid and be looking for contractors to help us renovate. And then, like I said, the $300 in direct financial assistance. What I would ask you to do, just because you'll see the project budget and anticipated timeline is blank, if you are comfortable with approving this evening, I would ask that you basically approve with the understanding that we would bring the budget and anticipated timeline to the city council. My finance director is out for the week, and there's a lot of, I just got recent information from RPC staff about how to fill out that chart. So basically the next time you see this as council, you'll see that timeline filled out. But the dollar figure would not change and the categories would not change. With that, I'm happy to take any questions you have.
Mary Alice.
So if I understand correctly, so right now we have approximately 200,000 for staff and 300,000 for direct rental assistance. And what I heard you say in terms of the ESG funds is that 210 for the staff would, in addition to being able to distribute the 300,000 in rental assistance, would allow you to meet your match at the state for the ESG program. Is that correct?
Yeah, a portion of that. I think I'd have to look at my budget. I think 70,000 of that is to meet our match. And the rest is to pay for staff over multiple years of distributing the additional rental assistance that will be coming through our office.
You'll be hiring either temporary or permanent staff to see this program to fruition.
Correct. So we will see, and I'm looking at how I'm going to shift staffing. So I don't have the how I will do it. But basically it will be temporary capacity increase. It will be a temporary increase of capacity within township that would allow us to process. See, what we usually have is about, we started at $100,000 a year in rental assistance. So we're doubling that every year for 3 years. Actually it'll be about 4 years. So we're almost doubling it for 4 years. We did, just for the record, if you look at the details of our budget, we're gonna taper. So we believe the rental assistance, because it's COVID related, we believe the rental assistance will be higher and then taper off over the years. So yes, it would pay for that temporary capacity building within township to process basically what is double the rental assistance.
All right, thank you.
And just to clarify, what will happen at town board tonight is the resolution authorizes you to sign the agreement, and then that will come to city council for final approval for expenditure of the funds.
Correct. So once council approves, and it will have the schedule at that time, then it'll come back to me and the city administrator, and we'd both sign at that time. So we're just doing our piece first.
Okay. Any other questions? Motion?
I'll move approval of Resolution T-2023-04-004R, a resolution authorizing the supervisor to sign an intergovernmental agreement with the City of Urbana for a Bridge to Home, filling the gaps in local homeless and housing services, ARPA funds.
Second.
Moved by Chandra, seconded by Sharice. Further discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Ms. Hersey?
Yes.
Ms. Colacetti?
Yes.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin?
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry?
Yes.
That motion passes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
With no further business before the town board, we are adjourned. And we'll move on to the city council meeting.